H here. Ever had the feeling someone was watching you? Well, they are. Ignore them, pervs. We've got something to show them, though, don't we? Perhaps this will bleach their prying eyes and give them a lesson they'll never forget. The time is ripe for you to hear this one, laddo. His name, Brock Hunley, age 42, a climber by nature, eager to go as high as the world would let him, especially at the expense of others. Location, San Francisco, California. Date, 2011. Brock Hunley was like any other man in California's big cities, or perhaps I should say any of America's cities. He was there to feed a mammonist spirit inside. Along the way, he would be desperate for some carnal pleasures, but generally he knew that money talks, and true power comes from money alone. Or so he thought. So most young men think. Age teaches us otherwise, unless a person has blinders to what powers lay behind this material mesh on which we stand and present ourselves. Like most, he was purged from university with a piece of paper in his hand and a few hopeful words, and then left in a world of utter chaos where dogs eat dogs. Anyone desirous of entering the system quickly learns how the game is played. Some play it well, some play it poorly. Others opt to find a little corner to huddle in, and try to be overlooked or forgotten, to merely eke out a meager living in hopes that the destructive efforts of others don't find them and ruin their years or decades of pointless moil. Some are pure parasites on the system, demanding and demanding, putting everyone on the defensive to their offensive demands and tantrums. Those awful sorts are usually the ones that do the least work and demand the most compensation. They will burden their crews, their companies, or corporations with glee, and crash entire systems or labor forces for mere joy of feeling the power of burdening others. To them, to be a parasite is power, and the power to be nothing more than a justified vampire living within a thriving body of business. And then there are those that play by the rules, though in honesty they are merely deluded to believe there is a moral compass at work within the system of mammon. They are all trounced time and time again by others, and removed from the system when possible, to allow others to succeed on their efforts. Finally, there are the Brock Hunleys of this world, of the rat race, of the culture of greed. Brock realized he wanted to be at the top, or to get as close as possible as soon as possible, in order to live a good life and become a god amongst men. No ceiling was too high, and he would paint any ceiling in order to get up close and break through. In the world of big business, such as the banking corporation Brock worked at, name withheld by formal legal request, unfortunately, there were no actual accomplishments. The work, as they call it, was just a formality. It was a giant business entity in a high-rise downtown where 48 floors were stuffed with desks and chairs and computers and printers and filing cabinets and cubicles, all humming with complete absurdity. The work was about noting and adding and rating and compartmentalizing and rejecting and etc., etc., etc. The kind of idiotic and mundane work that does nothing to further one's true life, inner or outer. Merely a way to occupy people until they wither and gray, or thrash about and destroy each other in an eager upward climb. And thus Brock, one of those magnificent alpha males, The kind of guy that believes the best is the last one standing, no matter what the cost. As long as he gets to be the best and have more money or influence or sex or power. And so he comported along his way to the trappings of corporate life. Once he had awakened to the reality of his situation on board a major financial institution, his epiphany was the will to crawl over others and destroy all those below or above him in the ascension to power. And so he did. He was almost gifted with the skills needed to frame, cajole, slander, and sometimes even slaughter others. It was music to his ears, you see, to hear of how others were fired, or committed suicide, or were mysteriously dead, or perhaps destitute at his subtle hands. And with each disabled, destroyed, or dead body below him, his path up the pyramid of precious profit and position was paved. Floor by floor he climbed, edging slowly into the corners of the scheme where windows covered half the office wall, and others looked on in envy from outside a personally titled door. Brock was able to achieve the American dream, and as most in his position, he had an odd and defined belief that he was chosen to be the highest force in life. That he was destined to rule over others, and others were subject to him. And so, as his office advanced upward in business, his self-righteous ego blossomed as well. He was not only determined to destroy those around him in business, if he couldn't use them, but to destroy every woman that he had broken up with. Indeed. He was the same inside and outside of his career. Life was his career, and domination was what fueled his self-esteem and gave him greater opportunity to make money. He would hound and slander and stalk and harass anyone possible until they would run in terror or be destroyed by the system, or destroy themselves. Oh yes, he was a complete psychopath. But to those above him, he was the best asset, and proved to them that he knew how to game the system and succeed. And soon Brock would be at the top of power. He had his final promotion to the boardroom where all the greatest of his ilk go in time. He was at the apex of his career. That day, he was ushered into the boardroom by the other 13 members of the board of directors, and this was his happiest day ever. They had watched and delighted in all of his accomplishments. They savored his ascent. They recognized a true power within this world they perpetuated. And now their black-clad bodies all shook his hand as Brock entered to take his place. It was an odd room, glass everywhere, to gaze out above this magnificent city, far above the feces-smeared sidewalks and needle-laden trash strewn everywhere. It was like a pristine vulture's nest, surveying the land, to pick the bones of every unfortunate person, desperate enough to play the game of usury or writhe within the system of corporate politics. The table was a black slab, ebony slab. The chairs, black, and on the other side, a red elevator door. "Come here, Brock," an aged man, the COO, cooed. "Meet our corporation CEO and get his blessing for your continued efforts to feed the glorious system and bring us greater and greater success." "We always need talented and fresh people like you," another said, guiding Brock by the back to the opening elevator. "You are the promise of a brighter future for—" Name withheld by formal legal request. Another board member chimed in. Brock last saw the doors close on 13 smiling faces, and then the ascension began, up to the top floor where the true power resided. And then a deafening thunk within the metal box. Everything stopped. The lights flickered a little, and some mechanical report was issued from under the elevator's carriage. Then falling, the sensation of ever-increasing velocity. Brock felt and heard the elevator plunging earthward faster and faster. He panicked and cried out like an impatient baby. But the world didn't care. The world didn't need to know, nor would it ever know. Faster, faster. The cable, Brock thought, must have cut, and the safety brakes failed. The lights counted down faster and faster to 1, and then the end didn't come. He passed the first floor, and yet was still dropping faster and faster. But to where? Where, he thought briefly. After a minute of extreme speed, the box halted for an extremely brief microsecond, crushing Brock's legs up to his skull and compressing his body halfway to the floor. And right after that second, the floor opened up into 4 slices and allowed him to jettison downward, out of the elevator, into the earth below. His still living form swirled and flailed in the air as he sped downward. Above, he saw the elevator dangling from a vast rock ceiling, and below him, twisted in and out of vision, magma. An endless lake of magma. Then he hit and was submerged, his body evaporating before his eyes and his soul remaining to witness as others came toward him in the fiery pit. They screamed and moaned and clamored to use him as a stepping stone to rise above the waves of superheated slag and catch some cooler air and mild relief from the ripping inferno below. Just as Brock was so keen to step over others, now he was to be stepped upon for eternity, in a hell he chose for himself. Back in the boardroom, the pleased members turned to each other and praised their god, to which they gave sacrifice, in order that they would remain rich and become ever richer. "I hope there are more like him," one said. "Don't fear," the COO assured. "We have an endless supply of sacrifices directly below us. The system works perfectly."
Like and subscribe before I die, and ring the little bell or you will surely go to hell.
Oh, we're telling spooky stories. This is not a spooky story. Oh, there's no way on the couch I can
it
sit.
depends how you look at it. It is kind of spooky.
I guess so.
Wait, that's it? That's the end of the story?
That is a